Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the hottest day of the season and also the busiest day of the season. It is really good. You know, I'm really excited to hear the stories and all the things that how Lakeside has impacted or touched your life in one way or the other. Before we get started, a few housekeeping uh, things there. As we celebrate 250th, apparently root beer is like one of the most American drinks that you can have, I guess. With ice cream, right? Yeah. Then you got to add hot dogs, and it just kind of goes downhill from there a little bit. But no, out in the lobby, part of our celebration, you can get your Lakeside branded root beer or cream soda, right? And so have that and see the generosity team. They were happy to serve you in that space. If some of you haven't seen your email blast or social media, just want to put a plug in for safety this weekend. This is the busiest week of Lakeside, and so we've already had one incident with a bicycle and a golf cart. So we are asking everyone that if you are able to walk as much as possible, but if you are using motorized transportation in any way, please be very slow, very careful, because as kids are moving in and out of various programs and streets, we just want to make sure we're watching out for our youth in that way. And so, and then if you have grandchildren or children here, please educate them on bike safety, going, following the one-way traffic signs and rules and so forth, that we can do that. We want to make sure that this is the best weekend and safe as well. So as we talk about Lakeside stories, my first introduction to Lakeside was a group of people invited me up in February. Why is that so funny, Brenda? you know? And so we walked around, and the two things that was very interesting about that meeting. One, I did not know it was an interview. And two, I could not believe all the things they were telling me about Lakeside. Because I'm walking around at what looked like a ghost town, and they're telling me all these wonderful things that happen in the summer, all these programs that happen, and they're telling me about all the people that visit Lakeside. And so my thought is where are they all at right now? Like what's going on? But and so so the interesting thing about that is just that when people are trying to explain Lakeside to you, and I said this the other night at dinner, you can't explain it. You really do have to experience it. And once you experience it, it gets in your soul. It really, you think about it, you adore it for a lot of different reasons. And I'm sure if we ask everybody in here, all of you have your reasons as to why. But part of that is that you realize there's no other place like it. There's no other place where community is happening and what community should look like and feel like. Do we have our moments? Every community does, every person does, every family does, right? But when you have a commonality, whether that commonality is pickleball or the lake, whether it's sailing or just fishing off the dock, it all impacts you in a way because you get to slow down and for a moment just be human. Not a title, not your position, not anything but human. And I get to connect with other humans. And that through that connection comes wonderful things, spark new ideas, inspiration for stories and books. inspiration for maybe business or ideas for what the next thing or chapter in your life is going to be. And so that is what makes Lakeside special, because each one of us have a story of how we got introduced to Lakeside and how Lakeside has made a difference in our life. And so today, Lorraine and Paul are going to lead us through a series of discussions and sharing stories. And so I was so tickled by Paul's story and the walleye oven mitt has that was just because I can imagine Paul as a little 8-year-old boy, right? And I can see now, knowing him as an adult, why a walleye oven mitt was like really special to him. But and so I told him I looked it up, and I actually found the walleye oven mitt. I don't know where it's coming from because it's taken a long time to get here. But I want to make sure I spark a little 8-year-old inspiration back into Paul by giving him this oven mitt when it comes. But so no further ado, we're going to introduce you to Paul and Lorraine. They'll tell you their story. Yes, give it up.
Something to turn this one on? We got it? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so Charles was sharing, I shared a little bit of my story last week at the foundation dinner. I am not on the schedule today, but afterwards, if you want to hear about my favorite oven mitt that I discovered as an 8-year-old in Hilltop House, I would be happy to share with you. So just to start, my name is Paul Sealing. I'm a member of the Lakeside Foundation Board, and that's sort of where this program is coming out of today. I live in Worcester, Ohio, but when I'm in Lakeside, you are likely to find me maybe on the pickleball courts or watching a sunset on the dock or enjoying our porch at 324 Sycamore. So that's where you'll find me around Lakeside. So that's who I am. Lorraine is going to introduce herself and a little bit more about our program today.
Thank you, Paul. I'm not going to stand in the light. Okay. So welcome, everyone. My name is Lorraine Sugart. I am also a member of the Foundation Board in Lakeside, and I want to welcome everyone to the Story Showcase. I'm so happy to see everyone here today as we gather to celebrate the thing that belongs to every one of us, the Lakeside story. Earlier this year, members of the Lakeside Foundation Board had the opportunity to work with Lakeside staff, and we love working with our staff here, to think about a summer theme that could truly include and engage every Lakesider. We wanted something that would feel just as meaningful to someone who has been coming here for 60 summers as it would to someone who's been here 6 days. And that is how we came to this idea, the Lakeside story, because each one of us has one. For some, that story began generations ago. Maybe your grandparents came here, or your parents brought you here as a child, or now you are bringing your own grandchildren here. For others, your Lakeside story is just beginning. Maybe you are still learning your way around, discovering your favorite porches. Whoops, sorry, my phone is not cooperating. All right, no worries. But what's really important is, as you listen to the stories that are shared here today, you think about your own Lakeside story. What brought you here? What keeps you coming back? What memories do you carry? What do you hope future generations will experience here? Because the Lakeside story is not just something that we remember. It is something we are still writing together. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this blessed community. And thank you for helping us celebrate the stories, traditions, and connections that make Lakeside so special. Now, I'm going to turn it back over to Paul to begin our Lakeside Story Showcase.
Thank you, Lorraine. So our first storyteller has been a part of the Lakeside Campground community these past few years, and her favorite donut flavor is vanilla coconut. Maybe some others of you out there as well. So please welcome Dawn Durkee, and she will be sharing a story about how the connections formed here in Lakeside led to hope and healing in her family.
Thanks for coming today. My husband, Ray Durkee, is a cyclist. He is a retired fireman, and in the world of first responders, there's a way to meld the two. It's called the World Police and Fire Games, and it happens every 2 years. It's a global event. It started in 1985, and it travels internationally. It averages 8,500 athletes from 70 countries in 60 different sporting categories. It's said to be the second largest amateur athletic competition next to the Olympics. Ray had participated in several of these competitions before I met him. We married in 2003, and the first time he broached the subject with me was 2014. The games were going to be located in our nation's capital, in Virginia, and he said, "What do you think if I compete in 2015? Well, I'm not a fearful person, but I said, we're not that far off from a terrorist attack in 2011. The threat still feels very real, and you want to know if I want to go to our nation's capital with all the first responder heroes from around the globe, but especially the host country, congregate in one place at one time. It doesn't sound like a very smart idea to me." So we got a new racing bike, made all the arrangements, and off we went. And what an eye-opening experience it was for me. There was an opening ceremony, just like the Olympics, with much grandeur. The athletes parade in with their country colors and waving their flags. There's a lighting of the torch, and a speaking of many dignitaries welcoming our visiting countries. There are presentations of medals for each event, silver, gold, and bronze, and there is an athletes' village that you go to in the evening where everybody congregates and shows off their victories from the day's events. The entire event left me in awe. But the memory I took away from the 2015 games was at every awards ceremony, while all were competitive, when it came time for podium presentations, they were all brothers. They put their arms around each other and helped one another hold their country's flag. They all held a commonality, and it was evident especially at the 2015 games. In 2023, the games were being held in Winnipeg, Canada. "Want to go?" he says. This time I was much less reluctant. Another new racing bike, passports, a lot of preparation, and a new sense of determination to bring home some medals. I don't fly, which is why we only go to the games held in North America. We made the 21-hour drive with 2 overnight stays on our way to Winnipeg. We settled into our Airbnb and went to go preview the first track. The organizers were also there, making sure the course was safe. You see, in 2015, there had been a fatality at a cycling event. Returning athletes held this fresh in their minds. Ray was registered for 4 events. The first race was the sprint, head-to-head for 800 meters. Ray took home the silver. The criterium is a mind-numbing race in which you go around in circles for what seems like forever. Ray won a bronze medal. Time trial. Time trial is a race against the clock. Another bronze for Ray. He is doing well this year. The 4th and final race was the road race. It took place at a Canadian national park. That's Ray minutes before the race started. The roads in and around the park were barricaded for the safety of the riders from outside traffic. We had taken a picnic lunch. We and several other American athletes and their wives were going to stay and swim at the park after the race. This was the final event for the cyclists, and we were all ready to relax. Several American wives walked from the athletes' parking area to the finish line and waited for the race to start. Because this track was large, the organizers lumped several male age categories together, plus all the women. Unlike other events, this created a mass start. The race entailed 4 laps around the entire park. The American riders, while coming from various states, had created a strategy. They were going to work together as a team for this race to possibly bring home a gold. Adrenaline was pumping, the horn blew, and they were off. The wives were waiting at the finish line. One had an expensive camera and could take pictures of our husbands as they zoomed by. The Belgian rider came past first. He was always first. And then, nothing. They can't be too far behind. I mean, Ray had won a silver against the Belgium just this week. Then the female competitors came. They are usually not next. They did not speed past us. They stopped and yelled at the judge's box. There's been a wreck. It's bad. Lots of men are down. All us wives just stood there stunned. None of our husbands had been through. Another woman cyclist screamed from her bike, "Stop the race. There's been an awful wreck." One wife had brought her car to the finish line. "Let's go," she said. We drove down the track a little ways, and there in front of us was the largest calamity I had ever seen. Racers and bikes were scattered all over the place, on every side of the road, in every direction. Athletes were gathered around, offering whatever help they could. There was one Red Cross medical team on site to take care of all these men, all scattered on the ground with varying degrees of injuries. Where was my husband in all this chaos? A very tall American rider named Tim was standing in the middle of the street waving his arms. "Dawn, over here." I ran to where Tim was. My husband, covered in road rash, tattered uniform and his helmet smashed, was resting his back on Tim's long legs. 2 Argentinian racers were standing with umbrellas to keep the sun off of Ray's face. Where did they get the umbrellas? I'll never know. There weren't enough medics to go around. They were in the process of calling backup and assessing the severity of each man's injuries. A medic came over to Ray. "Tell me your name." "Ray." "Where are you?" At first, Ray could answer the questions. Then they became jumbled. It was obvious his injuries were extensive. "We'll be taking him to Winnipeg Science and Medical Center." I said, "May I ride in the ambulance?" "No, we'll be taking him by Star. Put the hospital in your GPS and get to the emergency room." I didn't completely understand, but I followed instructions. I took a ride from a complete stranger, a Canadian, back to the parking lot. He said, "You know what Star is, don't you?" "No, I just I'm just going to do what they told me." "They wouldn't let me in the ambulance." "Well, it's not an ambulance. It's Canadian's Life Flight." That's when I knew it was bad. As he was driving, I put out a plea on Facebook where most people could see it at once. "Ray's being life flighted. He's been in an accident. Please pray." All told, there were 11 cyclists injured. 7 were transported to the hospital, and 3 were admitted, including my Ray. He had a brain bleed, a broken scapula, a punctured lung, and 8 broken ribs, some in multiple places. He had road rash all over his body. Later, we teased that I think he must have done a cartwheel down the street because the road rash was on every side. Because he was very determined and a little belligerent, Against the doctor's better judgment, she released him after 3 days. I was going to be driving this broken man 21 hours with 2 overnight stops back to Ohio. So where does Lakeside come in all this? Well, you see, at this time, we had been residents of the campground for 2 years. Many there had become like family. There is no doubt that immediately after my post, prayers started going up, but the support that followed was nothing short of, well, you know, just a little slice of where heaven and earth meet. You see, another piece to this puzzle was that our home every weekend from April through October was rented as an Airbnb. When we came to the campground for the weekend, guests stayed in our home in Canal Fulton. So Airbnb finds you and drops your status when you cancel with guests. The first weekend we had no choice. My husband needed to not move. We were fined and removed as superhosts. The following weekend, we had to come to our camper, or possibly lose our listing altogether. Lakeside came through. Steve and Bertie from the campground said, use our golf cart to get around. We're not going to be there anyways that weekend. After that, people picked us up wherever we needed to go, and sweet Dave, yes, campground manager Dave, checked in on Ray often, knocking on the door. Anything you need? You doing okay? Recuperation was slow. There were tests that were required by the Canadian doctor to be completed upon returning to the States. There was physical therapy, occupational therapy, bandage changes, chiropractors, massage appointments, acupuncture. I could tell how he was feeling by the gait of his walk that day. He started attending his fitness classes and eventually was released to go back to teaching his water fitness and spinning. In January, it came time to sign up for the 2024 Lakeside 120. He had ridden twice before the Lakeside 120, but had not been back on his bike since his accident. His own bike still was broken and had parts that needed replaced. He definitely needed a new helmet, and I needed to know he would come back in one piece. Sean Gill and his ride leaders were aware that Ray had been a cyclist who had only a year ago had a pretty bad spill. They took care of him. The campground families knew I was a mess having him ride in such a large group again. It only takes one to go down. But they weren't racing, and they were all riding with the goal of camaraderie, not competition. I couldn't wait to see them riding through the Perry Park gates, the kids leading the group in their matching t-shirts, cowbells ringing, Lakesiders cheering, but there was no one happier to see their rider on the circle in the front of Lakeside than this wife. The Lakeside 120 provided a non-competitive opportunity for this cyclist to reassure himself that he can still ride, that he can ride long distances in a group of others and not have a life-threatening calamity. Brought hope. Lakeside 120 brought healing. And in 2025, brought home 2 bronze, 2 silvers, and a gold medal from the World Police and Fire Games. Ray.
I took a pretty good cock on the head. I wasn't aware of much of the
All right, well, that was a really great story. So now I want to take you back in Lakeside history a little bit. Before golf carts became part of the everyday rhythm of Lakeside, can you imagine Lakeside without golf carts? Maybe some days we want to. One family's unusual little three-wheeler caused quite a stir. What began as a practical solution for a grandfather who needed an easier way to get around became a conversation piece, a childhood memory, and perhaps a bit of Lakeside history. This is the story of the first golf cart in Lakeside and the man who was ahead of his time. Here to tell the story is Matt Smith, who lives at Shady Pines on Plum and whose favorite Lakeside donut is vanilla sprinkles.
I'm afraid my story isn't going to be quite as dramatic as Dawn's, but that was a great story. And that's wonderful for you, Ray. Congratulations on that. And to be clear, she said donut. No. Donuts, please. Anyway, this little story is something that I adapted from a post I did on Vintage Lakeside on Facebook a while ago. And it's kind of a fun story about my grandfather. And I think we have a picture somewhere if it's in the system. Oh, okay. Take my word. There's a good black and white picture of them in there. Anyway, so this is about the first golf cart in Lakeside. Golf carts are as commonplace around Lakeside as June bugs, ice cream, and shuffleboard, and pickleball, I guess. Today, nobody gives a second glance when a golf cart goes by, but it wasn't always that way. I have a little story to tell you about the very first golf cart that roamed the streets of Lakeside, but in order to do that, I'm going to tell you a little backstory. A long time ago, let's say a little more than 60 years ago, when I was a boy of about 8 or 9, my grandparents owned a cottage on Lynn. They lived in Toledo at the time, and my family lived in Cleveland in Rocky River. Lakeside was conveniently located right in the middle. So my grandfather, his name was James H. Smith Sr., was a doctor, and he had to retire early from his medical practice after he had a heart attack. He and my grandmother, Mary, spent a good portion of their summers in Lakeside at their cottage at 156 Lynn. And like so many other cottages around here, it was done in white clapboard, and it had a big wraparound porch in front that went off to the side. Nana and Papa, as we called them, had their bedroom on the first floor. And there was another smaller bedroom on the first floor that served as kind of a sleeping room, and that's where I stayed when I would come to visit them. Now, this would have been, early 1960s. I was somewhat younger. Lakeside streets were not the smoothly paved asphalt that we see today. Second Street wasn't bad, but the other streets, especially like the tree streets that go up and down, was like a macadam, sort of a little bit of asphalt, a little bit of gravel, and there was also oil sometimes they would put down to keep the dust down there. So they weren't the greatest shape, but you managed to ride your bike on them no matter what. And I remember hearing stories of my grandfather, who was known to many around town as Dr. Jim. He was called to bandage up kids who got cuts and scrapes, and occasionally the vaccinations, I think they did up at Hoover Auditorium while they were vacationing in Lakeside. And I spent a good part of my summers in Lakeside as a boy, a lot of the time spent fishing off the dock. There was a man who lived across the street from us. His name was Mr. Allen, and for the life of me, I cannot remember his first name was Mr. Allen. But he had some huts in his backyard or behind the cottage. They had crickets and night crawlers and other things that he used for bait. And he taught me how to fish off the dock. And basically, his trick was you lower your hook all the way down to the bottom and bring it up about 6 inches, and you'll get a fish. And usually it worked. The lakeside of my boyhood looked much like it does now, but with a few differences. The building that now houses the laundromat over there used to be the fire department, the Lakeside Fire Department. And when there was a fire, there was a tower with a siren on top. You could hear the siren all over. And the firemen would then come down to the station house and figure out where they were going. And kids, like me, would go running down the fire station to watch the engines roar off to the place. And I remember there was like a light panel in the garage of the fire department, and somebody would scribble with a grease pen, where it was going, what they had. So it might say Grass Fire Quarry Road, and then they would go roaring off to the fire. There was a small grocery at the corner where Sloopy's Sports Cafe was. I guess that's now WB Pizza. And inside the grocery, there was this big Toledo scale, if anybody remembers those. And it was great, because you would get on that scale and had a big dial on the top, and you'd see, go around and see how much you weighed. I weighed less then. But that's what they used to handle the shipments of produce. And it was just fun to stand on there as kids and see how much you weighed. But my grandparents would go to Hoover every night to watch a show, but it was getting harder for my grandfather to get around because of his illness. Well, back then, people could use cars, but cars weren't very practical, just as they are now. They're not very practical to get around Lakeside. A lot of people just walked, or some people rode bikes, but that wasn't going to be something good for my grandfather. So he was a pretty smart guy. He was someone who loved gadgets. He had a 16mm movie camera, about big as a shoebox. And they would take home movies long before home movies, videos all became popular. And he had a big tape recorder, I remember too, and it was bigger than a proverbial bread box. But he used that sometimes to record letters. My Uncle Dan was a professor at Syracuse, and he would make trips to India. My grandfather would record letters and then send the tapes to my uncle to listen to them. So he was always good at keeping up on the latest trends. And somewhere along the way, he came up with the idea, allow him to get around Lakeside, and that was to use a golf cart. Well, people thought that was a little bit crazy back then, because golf carts are not used for much other than, golfing. But it was not the sort of thing you could run down to Siffords and rent one. But eventually he bought one and had arranged to have it delivered to Lakeside. And this cart was an older type, and it, instead of a steering wheel, it had a tiller. It had like 2 wheels in the back and 1 wheel in front, and you used that tiller to steer it. It also had a gas engine, which I think are not allowed here in Lakeside. And it had, we had a 5-gallon gas can. It was always fun to fill up with gas. But it was a 2-seater also. So there was only just the 2 seats in front. But my father and my uncle fashioned a kind of a seat across the back of it, so my sister and I could ride on the back of the thing. And that was really nice. But there were a few problems, practical kind of problems. The state of Ohio didn't know what to make of the darn thing. The Department of Motor Vehicles insisted it had to be licensed, but they didn't know as what. It wasn't a car, it wasn't a truck, it wasn't a motorcycle, it wasn't a bike. Well, they finally decided it had to be licensed as a motorcycle, but there were some stipulations with it. It had to be fitted with headlights, tail lamps, a brake light, and it had to have a horn. Well, again, my uncle, the one who goes to India, came back from India one trip with this big brass horn. It was like a circular thing with a big bulb on it. And so it was put right on top of the front there. And they go around and somebody getting away, honk, but it would get the attention. But it became quite a crowd pleaser and a conversation piece. Whenever we went to the grocery or down to the dock or sometimes to go to Hoover. And it proved a lot more valuable because they eventually sold their place on Lynn, and they bought a cottage on the corner of 3rd and Poplar, way down at the end of town there. So it was much farther away, and that made the golf cart even more important for them. But on those evenings, when there was a program at Hoover, my sister and I would ride on the back, and you know how the nights would get a little cool at night here, maybe not this week. But you would just, it'd be warm to sitting on the back of that where the engine was. And it was a very pleasant way to come back. So now when I come back to Lakeside each summer, we now have a place up on Plum. I see my family and I out there, and you see golf carts go by. Nobody thinks much of it, but I think of my grandfather, and he's just a little bit ahead of his time.
Hey, Matt, do you think that you could share the photo on some of the Facebook pages, Lakeside Facebook pages today, so everyone can look on Facebook? And we've seen the photo, and it's really cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, we were able to preview some of these stories before, and I was so excited to learn about the history of the first golf cart in Lakeside, so thanks for sharing that with us. Our next storyteller, let me find my right spot, is Brenda Haas. Brenda lives at 150 Oak Avenue and has been coming to Lakeside for about 37 years. And Brenda loves a maple donut. Please listen along as Brenda takes us back a few years to the story of an early summer spent working in Lakeside, the good friends she made, and how that summer changed her life forever.
Thank you. So my relationship with Lakeside Chautauqua began in 1989. It was a summer of sailboats, big girl independence, and crushing on the pizza guy. I was only 20 at the time. I didn't realize that 3 short months on Lake Erie would change my life forever. My Otterbein college buddies, Skip Skolnick, Mark Wilson, and Sarah Hall, strong-armed me, I guess is the right term, to become a gate girl, back before Gate Ambassadors was even a title. I expected the summer to offer an idyllic, wonderful opportunity, a waterfront experience, the opposite of my farm girl upbringing in the cornfields of Coshocton County, where I could have expected to spend my entire summer sweating profusely while helping my grandmother in her vegetable garden. My friends promised fun in the sun, plenty of young adults my own age, definitely a savage tan, and Lake Erie boat rides, something I had never experienced in my life. So I packed my bags with a healthy supply of bikinis, sunglasses, ramen noodles, that was the college food of choice, of course, and youthful optimism. As we rolled to a stop at Lakeside's main entrance, the gabled Lakeside sign, spanning 2 gate booths, seemed so official and yet so welcoming. The chain link fences, and this is weird, I agree, the chain link fences that branched off from each side reminded me of braces on invisible teeth. I'm going to see if any of these are up here. There we go. So I will just stop for a moment and say that you can probably recognize a few of these folks up here. We've got Rolly at the end, Pauline, Mark Wilson, Pauline Peckinpah. I'm the short one. I'm always the short one, just to clarify. Who else do we have up there? Anybody else remember anyone? Dan Edwards. We've got Pat Templeton at the end. We slid through those gates. I felt like I'd stepped back in time. An overused phrase here, I know, but it is accurate when you're in Lakeside. Even before I became a writer and words became my trade, the clever names of the cottages got my attention. My favorites, still today, include Irresistible, Ducks in a Row, and the Showboat, which I think is very aptly named. Humble cottages sat side by side with aged but impressive mansions. Few at that time had been fully renovated. On a college budget, Sarah, Mark, and I pulled a Three's Company 2, definitely before that was acceptable, and we rented an old but clean, tiny 2-bedroom cottage just steps from the gates. The cottage had no phone, no television, no dishwasher. Sarah and I shared a double bed, and Mark had a room of his own. The plumbing was definitely questionable, and the bathroom was so small, shaving one's legs became a life-threatening hazard, particularly if anyone was in the kitchen and turned on the faucet while shaving one's legs. Aggressive raccoons raided our outdoor trash cans nightly, and the smell of skunk often greeted us at dawn as we walked just steps from our door to begin our morning shift at the gate booths. Mark, Sarah, and I worked under the expert guidance and watchful eye of gate supervisor and Lakeside mother hen, Pat Templeton, who is surely missed by many of us. Skip, meanwhile, lived in the finished attic of his family's cottage on Park Row. It was the yellow one, by the way. He worked at the sailing club, teaching classes and renting boats to Old Salts. Much of our collective time as friends was spent at the waterfront. Here's the interesting thing. High school and college-aged Lakeside summer staff across all forms of division of labor became friends that year. Lifeguards, Abigail's wait staff, the sailors, the lifeguards, of course, Hoover movers, gate crew, maintenance, everyone. Many of the employees had been coming to Lakeside for decades, maybe all their life. Some of us were newbies like me. And it was quite a mixed bag back then from a socioeconomic standpoint. My middle-class upbringing and country background did not make any difference at all, or it seemed to not. We had Lakeside in common, and we enjoyed it together. We swam, we biked, we anchored rafts off the rocks on the east side of the pavilion and watched sunsets. We walked on the dock at midnight. We ate ice cream under the flagpole at its end, dodging midges, of course. There was also something in the water the summer of 1989. Love was definitely in the air. Skip began dating his future wife, Amy Addy, daughter of Keith and Gwen Addy. Mark Wilson met his future wife, Pauline Peckinpah, another of the gate crew that year, whose family had spent many summers at Lakeside for decades. Skip also introduced me to Mike Hawes, his sailing buddy of many years. Mike's parents, Bill and Sandra Hawes, owned the Upper Shelf gift store, which is now Maryland's. Mike worked at Little Caesars in Port Clinton that summer. He wooed me with pizza. He'd drop it off on his way through the gates at the end of his shift when I was beginning mine. In addition to feeding me, which is always a bonus, he made me laugh and he took me sailing. This happens to be Skip Skolnick's sailboat and my husband Mike, just a few years ago. He convinced me we would be fine when a sudden storm turtled his Force 5. That's the Force 5, still today. His steady calm in that moment reminded me of Lakeside itself. Calm, safe, like coming home. Mike and I spent the season under the misguided belief that our budding romance was just a summer fling. It was not. Despite living 3 hours away from each other, he showed up at my college with flowers in hand about 2 weeks after summer's end. We got engaged 2 years later on Lakeside's waterfront path, and we married at the Hotel Lakeside in 1992. Now, that was taken outside where the wedding was supposed to take place, but it was supposed to be an outdoor wedding. It rained, of course it did, and we ended up on the inside of the Hotel Lakeside. They allowed us to do it in the lobby. I came down that staircase in a plethora of satin and lace and a serious fear that I would end up in a pile at the bottom of the steps at my future husband's feet. I did not, I survived. Skip was Mike's groomsman. Sarah Hall, my roommate, was my maid of honor. Amy Addie Skolnick's mother, Gwen, played the piano. Amy, Mark, Pauline, and dozens of other Lakeside friends witnessed our vows that day. We were literally surrounded by Lakeside love on our special day. To this day, we go through the lobby of the hotel and always make a point of pretending to say our dues for our anniversary every year. Yes, I know that's really schlocky, but we're still married. We raised our children, Elaine and Michelle, on a steady supply and diet of vacations at Lakeside. They eventually worked as an intern and as a lifeguard and sailing staffer. After renting for several years, Mike and I bought a cottage in 2018 and moved permanently from Pittsburgh to the 100 block of Oak. We spend time with the Skolnicks year-round. They're exactly 1 block over, year-round. We play cards on our porch with Mark and Pauline Wilson, who still use their summer cottage on the front waterfront path, and they sometimes get their quiet season fix by coming to visit us in the middle of winter. My college roommate, Sarah, she visits Lakeside annually. She happens to be with us for the 4th. She will be renting our cottage this whole next week. We have a rental across the street that was originally owned by the George Gunlock family. And since Mike's experience with sailing was such a big point in his life and has helped shape who he is, we're particularly honored to have that property, because George Gunlock was one of the most generous original donators to Lakeside that I can think of. His donations and his support financially helped the Sailing Center become a thing. A patent attorney, Mike volunteers as the president of the Society of Old Salts. I am a Pittsburgh journalist, or was, I should say, a Pittsburgh journalist, and current feature writer of Leisure Living magazine, which is a magazine here in the Lake Erie region. In 2025, I published my award-winning novel, Finding Sutton's Choice. My debut is set in Lakeside. A goal in writing my fiction about family secrets and second chances was to shine a positive light on my favorite small Ohio town, and I should have brought a Kleenex. This is where neighbors watch out for each other. This is where friends prove to be friends for life. There's so much to appreciate about Lakeside. I still love looking out at that water every day from my porch, taking walks on the dock and eating ice cream. None of that has changed in the 37 years I've been coming to Lakeside and enjoying this place. I don't even mind the questionable plumbing, the odorous skunks, or the aggressive raccoons. But it's the people I appreciate most about this place. I make new friends every day, simply by walking down the street or losing at quiet season euchre, frequently. Most important, my oldest Lakeside friendships have withstood the test of time. They provide that steady calm like my husband did when I first met him, with pizza and sailboat tiller in hand, and that calm brings me peace. Just 3 short months on Lake Erie changed my life. Just 3 short months in this beautiful, unforgettable little place. 3 short months. Thank you, Lakeside.
Thank you, Brenda. Now, to close our story showcase, Brett Johnson invites us on a walk to remember, a story about a familiar route to Hoover that became much more than a walk from one place to another. Through neighbors, porches, music, flags, and memory, Brett reminds us that Lakeside changes as life changes, but the impact of this place continues to move with us. Brett has been coming to Lakeside, Chautauqua for 45 years, the same amount of time I have. He is from my hometown of Bedford, Ohio, and he is enjoying his 26th summer on Jasmine. His favorite patio donut flavor is a warm cinnamon and sugar, which reluctantly he has to share with his yellow lab, Duck.
Thank you. My name is Brett Johnson, and my wife and I summer at 648 Jasmine, which is right on the corner of 7th and Jasmine. One of my all-time favorite Lakesiders was a man named Dean Infield. You might remember him. He lived at 121 East 4th, which was right behind Hoover Auditorium in that tall red building right next, in the tall red house right next to the parking lot. And Dean had a saying. One of the things he loved about Lakeside was you get to know everybody well long enough to know everything you like about them, and not long enough to find out what you wouldn't. I sometimes think that might be true. Well, my story today is about our walk to Lakeside, our walk to Hoover. And like many of you, my sense is you take the same path every single time. So what we do when we go to Hoover is we take the little jog. We're at 7th and Jasmine. We take the little jog over to Cedar, down Cedar to 4th, 4th over to Hoover Auditorium. And like you, we come to appreciate different landmarks and people along the way. So my story is about that walk. One evening, my wife Becky and I were going to a program at Hoover Auditorium, and we started out on 7th and got to Cedar. And we started down Cedar, and at 616 Cedar, there was Harry Hall. He had a little short cement cinder block fence that was in his front yard, and we waved at Harry as he was weeding around that fence. A little farther down the road, right at the corner of 6th and Cedar, was a cottage called Summerwood. We never saw a person sitting on the porch, but boy, have our dogs loved that particular corner for lots of reasons. Farther down, we came to 543 Cedar, and there was always an older lady that was sitting on her front porch on red patio deck furniture, and we would wave at her, and she always managed to take a handkerchief, a white handkerchief, and wave at us. We grew to really expect that and enjoy that. At 510, Tom and Joyce Salamone were always there working on something in their driveway or a project in their house. But the story really has to do with the house at 434 Cedar, a house called To Return To. So one evening, we were walking down to Hoover, and we passed all those places, and we got to 434, and like many places in Lakeside, especially today, there was a little card table garage sale. And we were looking at the things on the card table garage sale, and suddenly out from the porch came a mature woman. She came out to tell us every important item that was on that table. She shared nearly not so great pieces from her house that she thought we should buy. She showed us a 3-ring binder that many of the pages were gone, but she convinced us they were still good. She told us all kinds of things, and then she shared that she had been a teacher. My wife and I are retired teachers now. We weren't then. She shared that she was a phys ed teacher, and that when she married, she stopped being a phys ed teacher, but she still had a lesson plan book. Would we be interested? It was old, it was used, but we bought it. And we learned, through the course of that conversation, that Mrs. Van Scoy talked about faith and friends. She talked about family and the importance of raising really good kids. She talked about the impact that a good teacher can have on people. And most of all, she talked about how rich her life had been because of her involvement with Lakeside. After that visit, we went on to Hoover. A couple weeks later, or maybe 3, I don't remember when, we started our walk to the Hoover program, which used to be at 8:15, if you remember. We came out our door on 7th, got to Cedar, took a right on Cedar. We passed Harry Hall as he was weeding his little cement fence in his front yard. We waved. We got to Summerwood, still nobody there. We passed the lady on the red deck chair. We waved, and she got the handkerchief out, and she waved right back at us. We saw Tom and Joyce working away at some project. And as we passed Mrs. Van Scoy's house, she opened the screen door and invited us in. We were ecstatic. We went into her porch, and we sat down. Just a couple old wicker chairs on the porch, and Mrs. Van Scoy, she talked about her husband, who we found out was a Lutheran minister, and that's why she had to quit teaching. She talked about the importance of things that were there and spending time. The sign said to return to, and we just felt really, really warm. She talked about friends and faith. She talked about family and the importance of raising really good kids. She talked about the impact that a good teacher can have on people as they grow. And she reminded us just how important the stories of Lakeside are and how important Lakeside was to she and her family. Then we went about our program walk. It was probably in August, and Becky and I were going to our absolute favorite summer program. It was called the Chautauqua Chorale. Craig Dietrich, who was the choir director at Hoover, had this one program a year, and it was really fun. It was kind of campy. They would play really fun music, and we couldn't wait all season to go to that program. It was a little drizzly that night, so we started our walk. We went out 7th, got to Cedar, made a right on Cedar. We walked down. Harry was there, a little drizzly, but he was weeding that cement fence. Summerwood, nobody on the porch. The old lady, I shouldn't say that, the mature woman that was at 543 was still on that red deck chair, waving that handkerchief as we waved and walked by. Tom and Joyce, they weren't there that day. But when we got to 434 Cedar, Mrs. Van Scoy opened the porch door and invited us in. Well, we were ecstatic, a little reluctant, our favorite program, but we went in. And then she invited us deeper into her cottage. And when we went in, her husband, Reverend Van Scoy, I have no idea what their first names were. I don't think we ever knew. Reverend Van Scoy was sitting on an old recliner there in their little living room. And we sat down and we talked. We talked about family and friends. We talked about their importance of Lakeside. And we shared lots of things. And then Mrs. Van Scoy said, "We have a little surprise for you." And they pulled out of their recliners a harmonica. And each one of them had a harmonica. And they started to play. And you can sing along. You're not singing. Let's try again. And if you don't like to sing, you can clap or pat your hands. Okay, ready? You got this, Charles. Well, Mrs. Van Scoy, they continued to play all kinds of hymns and music. They played familiar songs, camp songs. We had the greatest time. And at the very end, they said, "We've got the grand finale." And they reached into their recliners and pulled out an American flag. And if you've got an American flag, will you raise it? Did you get one when you came in? And they played patriotic songs. I'm not good at, so let's see if I get it. I have to remember how to play this one. All right. Well, we left that night feeling like we had missed the program we wanted to see the most that summer, but grateful the program we got to see that night. And we left thinking, the Van Scoys talk about faith and friends, family and the importance of raising good kids. We talked about the importance of a good teacher and the impact that they can have on people as they grow up. And most of all, we talked about the riches of having time at Lakeside and the stories that we get to tell. You know, we kept up with Mrs. Van Scoy through correspondences for a couple years, and things changed. We saw less and less of them. And we got to experience the memorial at the beginning of the season when they announced that Mrs. Van Scoy or Mr. Van Scoy had passed away. So things changed, as they do. We still take that trip down Oak all the time, or down Cedar, I'm sorry, all the time. We leave our house at 7th and Jasmine. We walk down to Cedar. We make a right. Harry Hall isn't there at 616, and neither is that cinder block fence. Ginny and Alan have taken it down and planted beautiful plants. Summerwood changed. It became known as La Vienne Rose. Then it became known as Summer Solstice. Our dog still likes that corner. The older woman at 543 sold the house, and now the red deck chairs are gone, and there's beautiful Adirondack chairs, and Dave and the Currys, Jackie Curry, are often sitting there. The Salomons are still at 510, and they're always doing work. And when we passed by 434, we noticed for a while there was like an old garden implement in the front yard, and now that's gone, and so is the sign. And it makes us kind of sad, but we keep walking as we need to go. You know, sometimes I like to think that if lakeside porches could have ears and they could tell stories, oh, the stories they would tell. Stories of celebration, stories of healing, stories of gathering, stories of sadness and grief, stories of just relief, just times to breathe. And sometimes when I walk around, I imagine what happened on that porch. But then when I get to 434, I know. There were stories of faith and friends, family and the importance of raising good kids, the impact a good teacher can have on children, and just how important Lakeside has been to the richness of their life. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give one more thank you to Dawn, Matt, Brenda, and Brett for sharing their story today. So we all have lakeside stories, stories about how we first came to this place, stories of connection, of hope, those funny remember when stories that get repeated amongst family and friends. My story is not the same as your story, or Brett's, or Dawn's, or Brenda's. But as Lakesiders, we can find connection with each other as we share our own Lakeside stories. This event has been the kickoff to our summer week of giving. As we think about the setting of all of these stories here in Lakeside, it's only possible because of the generosity of Lakesiders who, over more than 150 years, have given their time, talent, and treasure to this special place. Throughout this week, we have a few more opportunities for you to learn about the generosity opportunities. Monday night, we're looking forward to the Glow Run and Dance Party. Wednesday and Thursday, there'll be some opportunities at the Legacy House, again, to make a gift and get the America 250 root beer or pickleball pasta. That's been a big topic of discussion in our house the last couple days. And Friday, another opportunity for an open house in the Legacy House to connect with some advancement staff as well. So I thank you to all of you who have given to support Lakeside over these years, who have made the 4 stories that we heard today possible, and the many, many, many more stories out there. As we finish this event, we hope that you will stop and take some time to think about your own Lakeside stories, again, whether that's your first time here or those favorite stories throughout time that you've grown to love and share with others. We have popcorn and lemonade in the back for you, so we hope that you will stay and enjoy some popcorn and lemonade and share a little bit with the folks here in this room your own Lakeside stories today as well. So again, thank you to our storytellers, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
That's that freaky one. Music on 24/7, Babylon 24/7, ride the heat 24/7, rock to the beat 24/7. Music on 24/7, Babylon 24/7, ride the heat 24/7, rock to the beat. Yeah, that's that freaky one. Oh, you were born to be a freak. Rock to the beat.